Alrighty. Today I'm going to walk you through TrainingPeaks and I'm going to explain how I use it to plan out my training and also how I use it to track my actuals and keep myself from overdoing it. And I think many athletes would benefit from a simple system similar to what I use. Now, it's a bit daunting when you start. And so I'm going to just walk you through how I set it up, how you could set it up for yourself and get some value out of it. So let's start. Move me out of the way here. This is my zones section in the settings. And for using a training stress score, the key thing is threshold. So zone 4, threshold pace and threshold heart rate. And threshold power for the bike. So there's a default section, and this is if the workout wasn't specified, it'll go to default. And if you do a lot of skimo, sometimes when I do skimo, I just simply start it. What I've found is I started as a cycling workout because my cycling zones, last time I was doing a lot of skimo, were pretty consistent with how I felt it felt. In terms of that. Likewise with threshold, because skimo was higher altitude, my threshold heart rate was lower. So if you're dealing with altitude, don't be using sea level threshold values. Use your value that's appropriate to the altitude that you're at. And I'll give you a little tip on that with the bike too coming up. So default zones, default heart rate zones. Now, if you tinker with the split between easy, steady, moderately hard in those zones, that's not going to impact the training stress score. What it is going to impact is something I'll show you towards the end, which is the bins, the heart rate bins, when you want to do your zone analysis and if you want to see how much time you're spending in each zone. So bike, key thing for the bike, threshold heart rate. There's a slot for the max heart rate as well as the resting heart rate. And then there are auto calculation figures if you want to use different zone calculation systems based on lactate threshold, based on maximum heart rate, and there's different methods. I determine my zones the way I've laid it out in the zones chapter using race performance, using lactate testing, and using feel, and just getting a reasonable split between the zones, and then using feel as well as the other things we talked about last time in that long seminar I did. With the run threshold value there as well as the run zones, and then we come down to power, the power threshold value in watts, and then you can split the power zones as well. And when you need to adjust these zones, I recommend you adjust them gradually. Don't be making sort of big changes all the time. So get them approximately correct. And one of the things you're going to see when you're doing a lot of training is your zones are going to be moving day to day, and you're going to have different zones for different conditions. Cool conditions early in the morning are going to suppress the heart rate, particularly if you're a little tired. Later in the day, if it's a hot day out, you're going to be getting bigger responses. Just the way it is. There'll be different things. But the key thing to get in there is that threshold value and get that reasonably correct. Now, for speed, I've got my speed set at 4 minutes, and you can choose between kilometers per hour or minutes per kilometer. And if you change your settings over to imperial, it'll give you out your choices in miles per hour and minutes per mile. Then we get to the swim section. For swimming, there is a lot of different ways to swim a workout. There's different strokes. There's the use of flotation, the use of paddles. Rest intervals will change the metabolic nature of every speed that you're swimming. And just the general point that hitting the button all the time for every single 100 or whatever your interval you're swimming is a pain in the butt. So simplify. 17.5 points per 1,000 meters is my starting point. So 2K easy swim, 35 points, done. Don't need to worry about it. Now here's the deal. Expand that out to say a 6,000 swim And in the second half of that swim, put a 2,500 challenging main set. And that basic score might not be appropriate. I get out of the water, I'm like, wow, that took a lot out of me. And what I will do is I will consider the basic score and I will adjust it a little up or a little down. Again, good enough. And over time, you're going to learn what a reasonable score is for your standard workouts. And that's going to be good enough for you. It's good enough for me. Now, if you want, you can get into the fine detail. But I feel like it's a bit of an illusion because our bodies are constantly changing. The environmental conditions are changing. And I feel like it's false accuracy and frankly, a waste of my time. So that's the basics. Now let's get into how I use it historically and going forward. So this is today. This is my workouts come in as I do them. They're uploaded automatically to my account. These green ones are swims that my coach Julie puts in, and those are squad swims, real solid swims for me. And everything else I'm doing on my own right now. We got a group workout tomorrow on Friday that I'm going to try out for the first time, my first group workout in a long while. And what you're going to learn is you're going to learn that your standard workouts have a roughly standard score. And your standard loading days, when you combine everything, also have a standard score. And before we go into the planning, how I use this to plan, I just want to show you a couple things about the way the score is calculated. So this is a run workout. It's called Easy Off the Bike. It's just an easy run off the bike. Now, if I go here, it says RTSS. So that's the score based on pace. So it's comparing it to my threshold pace. If I click that, it pops down. It says HRTSS. So I could toggle to heart rate TSS between heart rate TSS and pace TSS on my run workouts. So if I don't want to change my settings, but if I toggle, it goes from a 51 workout to a 41. So the score goes down. My heart rate was relatively low, super easy run, cool room, treadmill, so non-technical surface. Now, if I was running outdoors on trails with a lot of different elevation change, particularly technical trails, if it's a little bit soft, the RTSS is going to be low. My pace is going to be low relative to the effort. So if you're doing a lot of trail running, particularly hilly trails or soft surface running, you might want to toggle between the two and just have a look at the different ways that it scores. Same deal on the bike. Now, here in Colorado, we do a lot of high altitude riding. And when you start going up high, particularly early season, power might not be telling the whole story in terms of fatigue, how much a workout takes out of us. So you get back home, you can pull the workout up, and you can toggle between the TSS done on power and the TSS done on heart rate. And you can get a feel for, well, what's the different relative scores? Now, ideally, if you're doing just these typical flat rides, typical flat workouts, they should be relatively close. And if they're not, that could be a sign, hey, somehow your zones might not be set correctly. There might be either the pace is out or maybe your threshold heart rate is not quite right. So that's something to bear in mind if you see big gaps when it's just a standard kind of workout. So let's cancel that. And then going forward. Now, if you want, you can project the score of any workout you want to do, and you can have workout builders and you can have standard workouts. And many of you that have coaches will have their standard workouts in their library, and they'll drag them in for you, and there'll be a standard score for that workout. Now, I think more in terms of loading days and easy days. And so I know what my standard loading day score is. So I just put in loading day, and I put in some time and some points, and I'm done. And really what I'm doing is I'm creating forward workouts. So I have my standard structure. So right now it's 2 days on, easy day, 2 days on, 2 easy days. So 4 loading days, 3 easy days. I roll that into the future. And as I fill in the actuals, It's going to let me see how I'm doing, and it's going to let me compare how tired I am and how much load I'm giving myself relative to historical load. And what do I mean by that? So you can just, by the way, you can just, once you have your standard weekend, you can just click. Let's get me out of the way. You can just click here and you can copy the entire week, and then you could paste it forward in the plan just by hitting those dots. But we're not going to talk about that just yet. So we want to go to the dashboard here. So let's blow this particular thing up. Now, what are we looking at here? So those red dots, every red dot is a day, and it's the score for the day. So you'll see it goes all the way from 0, and the highest day looks like it was today, 250, which is a lot of load for me. A year ago, 250 points would have meant at least 3 easy days for me. I would have been toast. So one of the ways that you can tell about your general capacity is what happens after these loading days. How do you tolerate them? Can you train the next day? Do you need extended recovery? When you make a mistake, this is a great system. A year ago, every time I went over 200, I was exhausted. So I was like, well, can't do that. So I put a cap on my loading days, and that helped me get more consistent with my loading. Now, my easy days are not more than half my average day. And by average, I mean my long-term load. So right now, my long-term is this blue line. So I'm up around about, what does it say? About 100. So my easy days are going to be not more than 50 points. And it's a good reality check. And you'll see, if I'm tired, it's really easy. Like that day was 7 points. That day was another 7-pointer. We got an 18-pointer there. So if I'm tired, my easy days are really easy. Now, I don't log my walking. I like to do a lot of walking when I'm not training, kind of keep the body moving. But that's something to bear in mind. So if it's an easy day, the goal is adaptation. So you're not trying to sneak in a little bonus load. So don't try and do that. Now let's just talk a little bit about something called TSB, Training Stress Balance. So the chronic training load, the CTL, is the average for the last 6 weeks. You can adjust that, but that's the sort of default. The acute training load, the ATL, which is this fuchsia line, is the average. It's the average load for the last week. So when you can see the fuchsia line over the blue, that means I'm adding load. So I'm ramping. I'm moving my chronic load up over time. Now, sometimes you might get sick. So that's what happened here. And this fuchsia line went way under when I had to unload. And as a result, my training stress balance went positive. I was deloading, so I hit a max of 25. You'll do the same thing before an A race. You'll be unloading. Hopefully you'll be healthy. And the idea is to bring yourself to a peak of performance. Now, other times, this is an example of unloading due to being tired. I had done a race, and after the race, my legs were hammered. And I just didn't feel that it would be prudent to do a whole bunch of training then. So C priority race, remember you're going to rest more after the event than before the event. And even though I rested, I didn't drop a lot of chronic load there. And then I turned it around, and because I rested preemptively, I've actually had a really good few weeks once I got back on track. And so that's something that you can look at. The other thing that I look at, just like we have break points with our loading days, we have a break point with our training stress balance. You're going to have a point that you're going to learn that if you go below that, in other words, if you push this fuchsia line too high, if you make your big week too big, you're going to have to give away too much load later. And I've learned that if my TSB goes below minus 30, then I should back off. Even if I'm feeling great, Never go below minus 30. That's my number. Your number might be different. The other thing, life stress comes up, a kid gets sick, something's going on outside of training, non-training stress. You're not going to be able to tolerate the same amount of load as when everything's stable in your life. So be aware of that for making adjustments. Now, bring the past, what I've done, and combine it with the future. So this vertical blue line here is everything's been done so far. And then looking forward, it's a reality check. So as I'm putting in the workouts, if I put in a really big day and then I have these other loading days scheduled further in the calendar, and all of a sudden I see, hey, it's showing me that I'm going to be at minus 40 next Thursday. I'm like, hey, even if I'm feeling great, that's a bad idea. So it gives me comfort to rest. Likewise, with these workouts that I plan and I put in, it's really the best case scenario. It's the max that I'm going to do. Realities, things come up with our lives and it doesn't always work out that way. And that's okay. So you need to be flexible and you need to get used to having to let things go with this recovery on demand method. So let's get rid of this. There's a couple things I want to show you. The zones that you have plugged in, as well as the split by sport when you're uploading, there's a nice little fitness summary here, and you can set this to any day, last week, last month, last 3 months, and you can look at what your split is by sport. That's something I like. The other thing that I really like that I want to show you here is time. I've got this set up as time and power zones on the bike, and then combined time and heart rate zones, bike and run. And one of the things you're going to find is that your hardest workouts are the ones that you remember. And this is a bit of a reality check on our memories. What is my real training mix here? Now, as I mentioned, I tolerate swim intensity better than other forms of intensity. And so it's not capturing what's going on in the pool. It's also not capturing the metabolic stress if you're doing plyometrics. Or January, late December, I did a lot of heavy, sustained strength training in the gym. That wouldn't turn up here. So this time of year, this is going back 90 days, is going to, I would expect it to be relatively easy bike and run. But I did do some tough running sessions, a little bit of tempo, and I did some running races. But you'll see in the scheme of things, relative to my total volume, it's not that big a percentage of everything that I'm doing. So I give myself a little bit of intensity to kind of move things along, but I'm more about building general capacity. So I just wanted to share that with you. And then the other stuff, my Garmin watch pushes up sleep hours, but with Garmin, I always consider it more like laying down hours. It's not so good on sleep. I got a Wi-Fi scale that pushes things, my morning weight up when I get up. That kind of all comes in automatically. HRV for training pushes up my morning data, resting heart rate. HRV gets pushed up automatically, and all that stuff just sits in one place. And if I want to have a look at it, I can go in, I can see trends over time, and that's really helpful for me. So I hope this helps you. Thanks for giving it a listen. Next up is going to be the lactate chapter. I'm going to do a seminar. We're going to publish the chapter, and then I'm going to explain to you how to use it. So you can subscribe and tune into that. Thanks.